Welcome to FOSDEM 2021 and this talk about Jakarta EE 9 and beyond. My name is Ivar Grimstad and I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. These are my details. You can find me on Twitter, on LinkedIn and on GitHub, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments about this talk or anything else. The topics I'll cover today are I'll give some background about Jakarta EE 9 and Jakarta EE in general. I'll talk some about the Jakarta EE 9 release that just came out, and I'll show a demo how to get started with it. And I will end the talk by talking about what's happening after Jakarta EE 9. So Jakarta EE, you're probably familiar with this history by now, but let's recap it anyway. The technology was originally known as Java EE and was governed by the Java community process at Oracle. And in 2017, Oracle decided that it was time to move these technologies to an open source foundation. And Eclipse Foundation was selected, and all the technologies were transferred over there under the EE Foojay parent project. And these are the technologies and the basis, all the projects that form the foundation for Jakarta EE. And the name, that's also an interesting twist, because you probably remember the Apache Jakarta project at Apache Software Foundation. And this was the top level project for all the Java technologies at Apache. And this project has been parked for a while. And when we were figuring out which name are we going to use for the Java EE technologies when we moved on to Eclipse, was we had a large community input, and Jakarta sort of crystallized as a name. And we asked Apache if we can have the name, and they gave it to us. And that is how Jakarta EE came about. And our webpage is called Jakarta.ee. It's super simple to remember, and this is your entry point for finding information about Jakarta EE. So remember this URL if that's the only thing you take from this talk, Jakarta.ee. Jakarta EE is all about open specifications. And by open specifications, we mean that we have established a specification process. It's called Jakarta EE Specification Process, or JESP for short. And some of the principles we have in this specification process is that we want to do code first. We want to take things that work, things that are proven to be something that is used by the industry, and then specify it. It's a very collaborative process where everybody can join. It's at no cost, and everybody is welcome. There are no such notion of a spec lead that owns the rights to the specification or any intellectual property. This is all open source. The intellectual property is governed by the Eclipse Foundation. All the documents and the TCKs are open source. And this is a major shift from before, because the TCKs used to be closed source. But now they're open and everybody can see what's going on, what's being tested, and you can add to the tests, remove from the test, and challenge the test in a much more open way than before. We also introduced the concept of having one or more compatible implementations. We don't have a reference implementation as we used to have in Java EE, where Glassfish was the reference implementation of Java EE. But now we have several compatible implementations, and it doesn't need to be Glassfish. For this release, it is Glassfish, but in future, it could be something else. We also introduced the concept of self-certification, which means that you obtain the TCK, run the test, publish the results, and make it available, and say that you are fulfilling the requirements for the specifications. And this self-certification is also something new that we've started with. The specification process is very similar to any development process out there. You have some project proposals coming in, you do some planning, you do some development, you have maybe some milestone releases, and then at the end you release a final artifacts. What we have are some of the reviews here marked in blue. It's the ones that are specific to this process and are required to ratify a final specification. And especially the release review is important because that's where the IP is locked in, and so nobody can sue anybody about any specification or technologies used in a specification. So what is a specification then? Our concept of a specification is that you usually have some sort of a document specifying it or describing it, and an API that are supplement to the specification document, which is the programmer interface that the users of the specification would use when they create their applications. And you would also have a test suite or a test compatibility kit that tests that a compatible implementation actually are implementing the API correctly. And when you have all these artifacts together, you have what we call a final specification. So what about compatible implementations then? For Jakarta EE8, we have a lot of them. And you can see all the usual suspects there, like the WebLogics and WebSpheres and Wildflies and JBoss and Pyara, etc., and of course Glassfish. And we also have some new players on the market, or new to us at least, but mostly from the Chinese market, like the Tunisoft, the Primeton, and Pusik, and that's our technologies. And that's interesting. And this space is growing, so we are expecting more and more to come in. And also for Jakarta EE9, after a while, they will pop in there as well. So Jakarta EE9 then. What's all about Jakarta EE9? Well, it's a bunch of specifications. It's the same specifications that were in Jakarta EE8. We've deprecated some of them or removed them, or well, they're not removed, but we are saying that we won't develop them any further. And these are the one marked in gray on this slide. You can also see that I've grouped some of the specifications in profiles. And we have two profiles currently in the Jakarta EE platform specification. And that is the web profile and the platform profile. The web profile is more targeted to the usual web applications out there and contains all the technologies that you would use for a web-based application or a REST-based application. Whereas the full profile contains more of the enterprise things that you would need to create more advanced applications and integrations to legacy systems. And Jakarta EE9 is available now. It was released in November last year. You can download the products from our pages under the compatibility pages, or you can go to the different vendors and download it directly from there. And we have three concepts or three focus areas of Jakarta EE9, and that is lower the entry barriers, platform for innovation, and easy migration. And let's go and look at each one of these. So the lower entry barriers means that we want to make it easier for new players on the market to enter. And by removing legacy technologies or saying these are not necessary in order to comply with the full profile or the web profile, we make it easier for new players. You don't have to have all these legacy technologies in. For example, the older versions of the EJ specifications are no optional, so a new implementation doesn't need to implement them. We also make it a platform for innovation. So by moving over to a new namespace, I'll get back to that later, but by moving to the new namespace, we get rid of all the ties backwards, so we don't have any restrictions when we want to innovate. And that's pretty important. And the focus, since the focus of Jakarta EE9 is to get this namespace going, we're not doing many changes to the other than removing some of the technologies, which makes it a pretty lean, nice platform that we can start innovate on now that we are totally free from the old restrictions for the old namespace. And since we're doing this namespace change, we want to make it easy to migrate. And that is also why we don't do much changes in this release. And we are providing some tools, or there are some open source projects at Eclipse and at Apache and other places that are making this migration easier for you. And these tools will do the transform on the bytecode level, so you don't actually have to change your code in order to run on a new namespace. So what about these namespaces then? You're probably familiar with that it is about moving from javax to Jakarta. And that's all it is about. And what better way of explaining this than actually showing a real migration in an application. So I'll go into a demo and do a migration from a Jakarta EE8 application over to a Jakarta EE9 application. So I have an application called Complete Duke. It's running on Glassfish 5, and I'll go through each step it takes to migrate this one over to a Jakarta EE9 application running on Glassfish 6. And the application I'm using is a simple Hello World application. And I could have done it by just having one simple class and returning this text message, but that wouldn't show all the concepts of the namespace change. So I've kind of over-engineered a little bit. And I'm using Jakarta REST to produce the RESTful endpoints where I have some JSON text giving me a hello message. I'm using EJBs to have a service that I can find the message, and I'm having a Jakarta persistence repository that queries a database to get the real message. And I've also added some CDI extensions here to show that there are things you need to think about when using those as well. So I'll go into my IDE and let's have a look at the code. So here you see I have the project set up. Let's just go and check the POM file. You can see I'm using Jakarta EE8. And these are all the classes I was talking about. I have a custom annotation here that is doing nothing other than that it's when it's discovered by my CDI extension, it will log the message to the server log. Then I have the actual REST resource, which is annotated by this Duke's annotation and just saying hi there. I'll show the message when we start the application. And this is using the Duke service to find a greeting. And the Duke service is again using a Duke's repository to find all greetings in the database. Pick the first one. If there are no greetings, then I'll just write a default message. And then the actual Duke repository, which is using Jakarta persistence and querying the database and just select all from the database and return it as a list. So that's the entire application. And let's run this one in Glassfish 5.1 and see how it works. So I'll just deploy it here. And I'll go to the log and have a look while it's deploying. You can see something is happening here. And there you can see the hi there message coming from the CDI extension. So I found the Duke's annotation and I'm saying hi there. And it now says it's started. So let's look at the server. I have Glassfish 5 running, and the Complete Duke application is saying hello or howdy Jakarta EE8. So we've verified that it is working. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So let's convert this to Jakarta EE9. And the first step I'll do is to update the POM file. And the only thing I need to do is change the version number. And because we've kept the Maven coordinate the same, so I'm just updating from 8 to 9 there. And the thing you will see happening now is that things will start, you'll get compilation errors because the javax namespace doesn't exist anymore. So I'll take one file and fix it here just to show you that you need to take some care. You can see there are alternatives to some of the classes. You can, of course, do this bulk. Or you can do a search and replace or whatever tool you want to use to do this. But just be aware that there are some ambiguities where you have to make sure you select the right one. I'll just quickly go through them here, and you can see some of them resolves automatically by themselves. And some of them you need to select something. and just take care that you're actually selecting the correct one. So I'm almost done now. And the resource, and then we should be pretty much done. The producers, you see, don't use the CDI producer, but use the one from Jakarta REST. And then at the end, the actual application. And here, it is not a Faces application, it's a Jakarta REST application. So just make sure that you actually do the switches correctly. So now I've done all the Java import statements. And from the talk, or from the what we talked about it, you would assume that this could be enough. But I'll show you there are some more places you have to think of. And one of them is the XML namespaces have changed as well. So let's open the persistent XML and look at it here. And you see this one is using the old jcb.org namespace. So let's change this one to the Jakarta. We've changed to HTTPS. Jakarta EE. The rest is the same. And we also need to change the schema locations of these namespaces. So this namespace was Jakarta.ee, and the rest is the same. And at the end, we have the actual name of the namespace. Let's see. Jakarta. Of course, you can do this by search and replace. Also, make note that the version numbers are updated. So, in this case, it's we always use the file name, version number in the file name. So now you can see it gets green here. And the IDE warns me that I'm not using the correct version here, so I'll have to update this one as well. And there you go. So you have to go through the XML files. Now, not all servers are picky about this, so you can probably use the old namespaces, but it's a good practice to do it to ensure total portability if an application server are actually validating them. The next thing you need to check is the properties, because the property as names are changed as well. So in this case, I have two properties here in this file that are using the javax namespace, and these are the Jakarta REST properties. And now I'm kind of lucky since I have them all in the same file, but these may be sprinkled throughout your application. So it may be a little tedious to figure out where all your properties are. So I've done the Java imports, I've done the XML namespaces, and I've done the property names. There are some more. So it doesn't stop there. If you remember, I'm using a CDI extension here, and this CDI extension are using a bootstrapping file, which is called javax enterprise inject SPI extension, which has the name of the extension class. So this has to be renamed as well to a file called Jakarta enterprise. There we go. So now I've done all the changes, and let's deploy this application to a Glassfish 6 server. Just add it. There you go. And let's do a deployment. And now we should be able to see if the CDI extension is printed in the log as we expected to do. Let's see if it's building, and there we go. Something is happening here. And you see the CDI extension is saying, hi there. And it's up and running. Let's go and have a look at it. And this one is on localhost 8080. And it's called complete to care as well. And you see the message is there. But it's saying hello to Jakarta E8. So that's the final thing you need to remember, is that you probably have some data around or some dynamic properties that you will need to change. And these may be in property files, or they may be in a database like this one, or some other places in your system. So, and these may be the javax prefix properties that you need to change, or they can be other things that you are concatenating strings to build these strings and stuff. So you probably need to do some changes in your database or other places where you store some properties. And now you can see it's up and running, and it returns the correct message. Let's go back to the slides again. So beyond, I'll just recap the, sorry about this. Recap what we need to do the namespace migration. So you need to update the Jakarta EE version in your POM XML. You need to fix the imports and update the XML schema namespaces. Then rename the properties that are prefixed with javax. And rename any bootstrapping files you have in your system. Not everybody has these, so it could be you can skip this step. And then check that you have any dynamic data or content or properties that you are building that are using the javax or Jakarta EE 8 versions of the properties. So all this is available on my GitHub. It's under the Jakarta EE Duke. You can see a guide there that guides you through all these steps, and you can do exactly what I did in this talk. So just try it out and see how it goes. So beyond Jakarta EE 9, we are already in the work of creating a Jakarta EE 9.1 release. And our originally planned for Jakarta EE 9 was to support Java SE 11. But due to the significant amount of work that was required in the test suite and the Glassfish implementation, we had to go for a Java SE 8 support for Jakarta EE 9, and with a Jakarta EE 9.1 release coming out in the first quarter of this year, which will support Java SE 11. The timeline for Jakarta EE 9.1 is that by end of January we need all the specifications that are planning to do updates. So if any of the individual specifications want to have some changes done and included in this release, they have to do a plan review by January 31st this year. And then directly after that, we'll gather all together and create a platform plan review early February. And then we'll see when the actual release date will be. So beyond Jakarta EE 9 or beyond Jakarta EE 9.1, there are some things happening. In CDI, there are pretty much a very good way of defining a CDI Lite version of the specification. And this CDI Lite version will remove some of the dynamic, or it will be a subset of the CDI specification, and it will, without the dynamic properties of CDI, so it will support ahead of time compilation using, for example, GraalVM to compile to native. The release cadence for Jakarta EE has been, we released Jakarta EE 8 last year and Jakarta EE 9 this year, or actually in 2020, and this year we have 9.1. Later this year we will see if there are room for another release. So maybe one release a year, two releases a year. If it's a minor or major, depends on the content. We'll enforce semantic versioning on the platform specifications, and let's see where we land. But I would guess somewhere between 1 and 2 releases a year, but we haven't really gotten to establish a fixed release cadence yet. It may come in the future. We want to decouple the specifications or some of the tests with the specifications, so it's easier to release independently. Right now the TCK is kind of bundled a little bit too tightly together, so we want to split it up a little, and this work is something that is probably going to take some time, and we will need all the help we can get to get this done. We want to see some sort of predictability around the SE versions. I don't expect us to follow the Java SE versions, especially on the numbering or the LTS versions, but it should be pretty predictable which version of Java SE that the next version of Jakarta EE is going to be based on. There are some new APIs coming around. Jakarta NoSQL is potential for inclusion. They are doing some great work in supporting different versions of NoSQL databases. And so that could be a candidate for future platform specifications. Jakarta MVC 2.0 is out there. It's on the Jakarta namespace, and it's ready for inclusion whenever the platform team decides they want to have it, if they want to have it in the platform. Some sort of externalized configuration is on the wish list. We are working on figuring out how to leverage the microprofile specifications in Jakarta EE and vice versa. So we'll probably be discussing this pretty much in the future. But some sort of externalized configuration is definitely on the wish list. There are some possible updates to other specifications, such as Jakarta Security, which may add some authentication mechanisms like JSON Web Tokens, OAuth, OpenID Connect, and that kind of things. Jakarta Currency will continue their CDI alignment, maybe have some convenience annotations for defining some of the, for example, the managed executor service definition or something like that. Jakarta Messaging probably could look at adding some other protocol support such as Kafka or MQP and MQTT, and as well continue the CDI alignment that was started in Jakarta EE 8. Jakarta Persistence will look at some simplifications, updates to the persistence query language, maybe add some caching mechanisms, and multi-tenancy has been on the table. So please join there if you have any input on how to do that. Jakarta REST will continue their CDI alignment, maybe add some support for multi-part form data and some changes to the Java SE bootstrapping mechanisms. And there are more specifications. I'll list a couple of them here that are likely to have some changes coming. So that was what I had for today. And remember, Jakarta EE9 is lowering the entry barriers for participation. It's a platform for future innovation, and we are hoping that going to this version of the platform is a easy migration way to get started on the new technologies. Some of the resources I've been talking about today here is you can find all the starting points, all information about Jakarta EE, all the specification, everything on jakarta.ee. The sources for all the specifications and Glassfish and all the other implementations are on Eclipse EE Foojay organization on GitHub. If you want to get listed with your blogs with Jakarta content, you can submit to jakartablogs.ee, or if you just want to read content on Jakarta, this is a great place to get that. I also have a weekly newsletter called #Jakarta EE, which you can find on my blog on java.eu. So I thank you very much for listening, and I think we have time for some questions.